Hello and welcome on Mindset&Co. This is your host who has been feeling a little bit under the weather for the last few days, and I really feel like I need to take a break. Just even a few hours off here and there in my day, because I don't know what's happening in my body, but it is quite brutal and painful. So yes, this is where we're going, but I thought that before I would take a little break, I would just jump in here and have a little chat with you about guilt. Now, if you've been hearing the last few episodes, you know that I have opened a masterclass over 30 days where I ask all the participants how they're feeling, kind of, walk with them through their intention journey. And a lot of things that came up for several participants was feeling guilty. And it got me thinking that maybe I could dive a little bit more into the feeling. Why are we feeling guilty? Where does it come from? And how to kind of resolve that in our lives. And this is what I am going to do in this episode. So take a step back, just relax. If you're at home, maybe grab a little hot drink and sit in your couch. If you're listening in transportation, I hope that my voice is, relaxing enough. But also if you're driving, please be careful. Okay, so let's dive into it. So when I sat down and started to think about this topic and what I wanted to bring into this episode, I, started to think of why would people feel guilty and where does that guilt comes from. And it got me thinking that, for so many years, we've kind of followed religion, maybe not so much today, but, in, previous generations, our ancestors probably followed a specific religion. I'm just talking about religions in general here. But when you look into religion, there's a lot of it of kind of a code of conduct that people need to follow. And if you don't follow this code of conduct, you basically brought out of the community, kind of shamed by the community because you're not following this code of conduct. And as humans, one of our main need is sense of belonging to the community. So as humans, we do want to follow this code of conduct if everyone else is following it, which was, back in the days. Again, maybe not too much today, although it depends on where you grow up. Obviously, it's still predominantly covered by religious beliefs, but I would say less and less, but back in the days, that wasn't the case, and religion was predominant a little bit, everywhere. And we felt like we needed to follow this code of conduct to have this sense of belonging to the community. And maybe there wasn't really any other choice either. Maybe our ancestors felt like there was no other choice. And these beliefs are passed down, obviously, through education, because when you acquire certain beliefs and believe that they are true facts, like some religions were trying to pass down onto people, then you pass it out onto your children. Those beliefs about how they have to behave, how they have to conduct themselves. And then we grow up and build the same cycle again and again, pass it on to your children. So it much depends on where you lived, and you didn't need to have, religious parents or religious people who raised you to feel shame and feel guilt. Obviously not, because it can come from a lot of places. But I'm just focusing on religion right now because I think this is where, back in the days, a lot of guilt was coming from, when you have to repent from your sin and you had to talk to the priest whenever you did something out of that code of conduct, and this kind of sense of feeling like a little child who has to tell their parents what their sin was or what the mistake that they've done was. And just this sense that having this higher power in some sort telling you how to behave or how you should behave, and if you fall out of line, then you should feel guilty. So this is what I was thinking about when I was, writing a few ideas for this episode. The first thing that came to me was religion. So a lot of guilt and shame, in my opinion, can come from religion. And that even though we're not religious, we still have today, specifically women, where we're still not treated right in today's society. There's just so much imbalance still. And this was first brought on by religion, where women were not treated as equal as men, and we had to behave another way than men had to. So religion is one. The second thing that came up to my mind when I was writing this was how people give us their own opinions. So as I've mentioned, we grew up and we acquire limiting beliefs. We acquire certain experiences, whether from ourselves or whether from our parents, and we acquire this as the truth, and we grow up thinking that this is still true and this is reality, and then we pass down our reality, our opinions to other people. But when you receive a certain opinion from someone, sometimes we take this as a critique. And that critique can make us feel shame because we've had a different experience than this other person, etc., etc. So for me, for example, for such a long time, and sometimes I'm still struggling with this, honestly, is when I was younger and both my parents, in different situations, but both of my parents told me that I had a little belly and that I should be careful about what I was eating. And I was around 10, 11, and this is me growing up thinking that I had a little belly, and I was doing a lot of workouts, sports, not because I like to do that, but because I felt like I need to, and watching out what I was eating. And there were several reoccurrences later of ex-boyfriends who told me I had a little belly, even though I felt like my reality was different. And it developed, into something that sometimes was a little bit unhealthy for me, where I would not eat certain foods, or I would work out so much, and if I wouldn't work out, I would feel guilty about not doing this. So this is a typical example of some people passing down their opinions, their experience of, what came up for them and how reality should be onto me, and that made me feel guilty in a series of events, obviously. But guilt can also come from other people's opinion. Guilt can also come from what I would say commonalities, or what everyone else is doing. So this is a little bit tied down to, religion, having a code of conduct. But if your whole community is doing something and you want to do it differently, then maybe you might feel some guilt towards doing something different, or maybe some shame of doing it differently. And I'm thinking a lot of moms, for example. We call it mom guilt. There's even a word for that. Isn't that crazy though? Mom guilt. Where literally moms feel guilty if they feel like they're not doing something proper for their children, even though they're giving their 100%, even 200%, and they still feel like it's not enough, and then they will feel guilty. Or if someone else is telling them, another mom is saying, oh, I'm doing it this way, and then you're like, oh, but I've never done it this way, I should have done this, blah, 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 and feeling this guilt towards your children. So That is just one example, mom guilt. But there's so many things that we could apply this to, where, our community around us is doing things a certain way and we decide to do things another way, and we feel that guilt. And I would say the most important thing when you feel guilty is to find the source of that guilt. What was the first kind of memory situation that made you feel guilty and brought you to where you are today? So I am going to give you a little pattern here. I'm going to explain everything, but this is something that I use a lot in my coaching sessions and that have been helping a lot of my clients, and that I have also tried before, because I try everything before, trying a few methods on my clients, on my participants. I would never do something that I wouldn't have tried myself. So this is also something that I have tried and that worked for me. So basically, we always feel an emotion, and that emotion brings a thought. All right, so let's say that we're feeling guilty, and then we're having a thought. A thought might be that, oh, I'm so lazy. Or it can be like, oh, I'm not enough. All these thoughts linked to feeling guilty. You can write it down, by the way, as I'm mentioning this. So you can start by mentioning your emotion. So emotion would be guilt, shame, and then move on to the thought. So what are your thoughts? You can pause this episode as well if you want to do this exercise with me. And so our thoughts just go to an action. So what is our action linked to feeling, lazy or feeling like you're not enough? Again, this is very personal. So for some people, it might look like, they procrastinate, or on the contrary, they want to do more. Or sometimes they overdo. Like I mentioned, in my case, it was about working out. I felt like I was never working out enough, and if I would miss a workout, then I would feel completely guilty. So the action would be to work out more. And then that would be kind of seen as overdoing something. So this could be an example of actions. And then following an action, you have a result. So the result of feeling guilty, right? Or that could be any result that you want to bring in, right? Or feeling too tired. And then the cycle continues and continues. So this is an exercise, again, that I use with my clients that is working really, really well. And that helps us understand what is your pattern here. We always have a pattern. When there is an emotion, when there is actions that were taken, there's a pattern, and we just need to put things in a precise order, understanding the pattern, understanding why we are doing what we're doing. And this is, basically mindset. So how to overcome guilt? This is my own list. Obviously, I came up with this list, and if you want to change or alter a few things, that's completely fine. This is not the absolute truth. Once again, this is not the absolute truth list. This is something I came up with and I thought could help you. So, how to overcome guilt and or shame? So as I've mentioned, the first step is to observe your pattern. So without any judgment at all, just do what I've mentioned in the exercise before. Notice your thought. Notice first your emotion, then your thought, then your action, and then what's the result. Okay, that is your pattern right there. So when you understand that, first you are going to bring a lot of awareness to how you're acting and how you're feeling. And there's going to be a lot of understanding. And this is a very powerful exercise. And if you do it, please let me know which results you have, because I always love to hear about it. And I think this is a really amazing exercise. Anyway, but this is the pattern, okay? And then really ask yourself, why? Why do I feel this guilt? Where does this come from? What is the source of it? Okay, there's always a source to how we're feeling, especially feeling guilty, always has a source. For example, me, I've mentioned to you that I feel guilty about not working out enough. Okay, if I just say, oh, I feel guilty because I'm not working out enough, this is not my source. My source was from my parents when they told me I have a little belly. And then my ex-boyfriend told me this, my ex-boyfriends, there were two of them actually, I remember very well. They just mentioned the same thing. And, this and this kind of rippling effect kind of triggered me to this guilt today that I would feel if I don't work out enough. Or if I'm eating a little bit too much. So this is where the guilt comes from. What is it for you? What is the source of that guilt? You might not have the answer right away, but you can listen to this and trust me, the answer at some point will come to you subconsciously, and then you will just think about it consciously. Okay, so the answer will come to you. Do not panic. Don't try too hard either if it's not coming right now. Trust me, it will come at some point. So again, no panic. Okay, everything's fine. You will get the answer one way or the other. Another step that I've also mentioned in previous episode was setting boundaries. Okay, we don't always need to hear people's opinion. Okay, we just have to set proper boundaries. So if you have your friend, let's say, or family member that tells you maybe to do things differently all the time and that makes you feel guilty for something, even though they might not be aware of it, just let them know. Let them know that, okay, I actually do not want to hear that today. It makes me feel a little bit guilty and I don't want to feel like this. So this is my boundary. Please respect it. I've done it before with my partner, actually. And I would say it works really well, because if you just constantly take on to what other people are saying, you're basically opening a portal, right? And then they're going to keep telling you things because they think that it's okay to tell them because you don't have any boundaries. If you're stating your boundaries and you're like, I'm not going to take that anymore, then people start to listen and then they just move on to something else. And this is not a problem anymore to you. And if they're not respecting that boundary, then maybe it's time to move on or cut loose. I know it's not an easy step, but do you really want someone who makes you feel guilty in your life? Especially after you've told them your boundaries and they're not respecting it? If they're not respecting your boundaries, they're not respecting you. Okay? So I know this can be hard to hear, and I hope that there's no one who's listening right now who has a person like this in their lives, because it's really bad. But this is what we're doing here. This is what we're bringing awareness on how you're feeling and pinpointing exactly what it is that makes you feel guilty will also help you pinpointing who is not respecting that boundary for you. And then you can adjust accordingly. So setting boundaries first for yourself and then state them out if it concerns other people or other situations as well. The other step that I want you to do is to state why it's not true. Why does your statement of emotion and then you have a thought that you're lazy and that maybe you're just procrastinating too much or that you're not enough? Basically, why are your thoughts about feeling guilty not true? So stating the complete opposite. Even though you don't believe it at first, if you write it down or say it out loud, just keep repeating them. Okay? Just keep doing it. And at some point, you will trigger something in your subconscious and you will believe that it's true. If at first you don't believe that, oh, it's not true, I'm not lazy or anything like this, keep repeating it. And if it's necessary, repeat it every day. Write it down somewhere, do a little mantra, put it in your bathroom, put it in your kitchen, just a place where you will see it often, and say it out loud. Why is it not true that you are not lazy, not guilt, if you shouldn't feel shame? Say something positive, okay? Because sometimes we keep repeating ourselves things in our heads, and what they really are is just in our heads. This is specifically true for feeling guilty. My fourth step can be uncomfortable, but it's a great exercise. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and just smile. Just smile because you're enough. Smile because you're here today, and because you can look at yourself and feel proud. And just feel the sense of safety and protection around you when you look at yourself. Because you are your biggest supporter in this life. You are the only one who can state their boundaries, who can accomplish all the things that you want to accomplish. It's you. You are your number one. And it might not always feel this way, but I promise you that you are. And if you take care of yourself, then others will also take care of you. So just do this practice if you can, maybe every morning, every night before sleeping. Spend just a few minutes smiling at yourself in the mirror. It might feel very uncomfortable in the first few times that you do it, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you will feel and the better you will feel. I promise you, this exercise is often overlooked, but it's also very powerful, and it's amazing what it can do. And it's free. It's basically just looking at yourself in the mirror and smiling and feeling okay and protected and loved by yourself. So it might feel awkward, but it works. My last tip is, if you need further assistance, and I know not everyone has the resources to do so, so I know there are some Facebook groups out there, probably for mental health support. This can be a first step. Try to look on YouTube for meditation, mindfulness, breathwork. I do have a few breathwork and meditations on my channel at Mindset&Co. If you want to look, I also have it on this podcast. And if you have the resources and you need further help, reach out to a therapist. Okay, you can also reach out to me for breathwork and coaching. This can be additional to therapy. Just anything that you feel called to in the moment. You can also just reach out to me if you want to chat. I am on Instagram, and you can find the links below. And if you're in Vancouver, I also do a lot of events that are usually very affordable for breathwork and microdosing. So you can also reach out in there, and like I've mentioned, I also have a bunch of free resources on my website, on YouTube, on my podcast. So there's a lot of options there if you don't have the resources yet to book sessions or seek out further assistance. But just wanted to jump in here and address the feeling guilty, because it really comes from, beliefs that we have about ourselves and that we constantly think about that make us feel guilty. Truth is, inside you are completely you. You are safe, you are at peace. There's no guilt. Guilt is just typically our ego, and I don't mean ego in a bad way. Our ego is our personality, is what makes us human. But know that deep down with your higher self, you are completely full of peace, of love. There's no guilt in there. There's no need to feel guilty, because you are perfect the way you are. And you are in the perfect situations at the perfect time. And I know it's hard sometimes, and I understand that, because we're all going through hard times. But if you're here and you're still willing to try, then you've already won. And I don't know who needed to hear that today, but I do hope that it just reaches the right ears. And I was just speaking with my heart. So yeah, whoever needed to hear that, I hope that it just, rings something in you. And on these great notes, this is all I have to say to you today. Don't hesitate to subscribe, to maybe share this episode as well, and to put a comment if you can. You can follow me on Instagram at Maureen Levaillant. All the links will be in the description. As I've mentioned, I do a lot of breathwork events in Vancouver. I also do online sometimes, so you can reach out to me whenever. And if you're struggling with guilt, you can send me a little message and maybe we can chat a little bit about it if you're up to. I am always here for you, and I always love to receive those messages and really making sure that everyone is doing okay. So please do that. And in the meantime, I am going to go on a little break after I edit this episode, and I'm going to have a good rest. I hope that you do too, or if you're beginning your day, that you will have a good rest this evening and afternoon. And I will see you soon. Okay, bye.